A reader asks, what do you mean by assumption testing? Is this just prototyping our ideas and getting feedback from customers? I like this question because it's very common. I think most people misunderstand assumption testing. We think it's some of the things that we're already doing. And yes, prototyping our solutions is a good thing to do, but it's not assumption testing. The key difference here is when we're prototyping a whole idea, we're getting feedback on a whole idea. When we're assumption testing, we're getting feedback on a very specific assumption. And I'm going to talk through an example to help illustrate this. Let's imagine that we're building a grocery store list app. So an app where people keep track of the groceries that they need. There's a few things I want to do. I'm going to start by story mapping this idea. I'm going to map out what are the steps my customer needs to take to get value from this solution. So first, they have to open the app. They have to add an item to it. Maybe I want them to add a category to that item. Then later, when they go to the grocery store, they have to remember they have the list and open the app and mark off items as they purchase each item. Okay, I could prototype this whole solution and start to get feedback on, is this going to work? But the problem with prototyping the whole solution is we're asking our designers to do all of the design work before we've gotten any feedback that this is the right path to move forward on. I don't want to do that. I want to save my designers work if this is the wrong idea. The second problem with prototyping whole ideas this early in the process, when we're still working with concepts, is when we're getting feedback from a customer and we're showing them a full product, there's so many little details that we want to get feedback on that it's impossible to do that in a single session. Or maybe we can, but the session's going to take an hour or more, and then it's a huge project to get all this testing done. With assumption testing, our goal is to break the idea down into its underlying assumptions, the particulars that the idea depends upon that needs to be true, and then we're going to test those particulars in isolation. So for example, with my grocery store app, what are some of the things that needs to be true in order for my customer to get value from this solution? They need to know the app exists. They need to remember to open it when they think of something they need from the grocery store. As they're adding it, they need to be able to identify the right category, right? They need to be willing to take the time to add it to an app. They need to be willing to select a category. They need to understand why they might select a category. They need to be able to do it. Later, when they're at the grocery store, they need to remember to open the app. They need to look at it, like mark things off one at a time as they go. So there's a number of things that need to be true. Now let's talk about this idea of a category. Why might I want people to add categories to items? Well, my list app actually does this, and I love it because it allows me to sort the categories based on how I walk through my grocery store. So then my list is in order based on how I walk through the store. I love this feature. I did take the time to add those categories, but let's say I have some concerns that who I'm building for won't actually take that time. That's a whole nother set of assumptions. Do they understand the value of this feature? Do they know the layout of their store? Do they know how to add the appropriate category? I'll give you one that might be tricky. Like we all know that chicken is in the and steaks are in the meat department. We know that milk is in the dairy department. But what about eggs? Why are eggs often in the dairy department? They're not dairy, right? So this is a little trickier than it might sound. So we could prototype this entire solution and get feedback, but we're not likely to get into these specific details about adding categories until people know the category. And that really could make or break that specific feature. So with assumption testing, what we're going to do is we're going to test one particular at a time. So I might run one test to just evaluate the assumption my subscribers can accurately categorize their grocery items. Okay, to test that assumption, I don't need to prototype my whole solution. In fact, I could design some really simple activities. If I have a customer on a phone call, I could ask them, how would you categorize milk? How would you categorize chicken? How would you categorize eggs, right? And just see if they can get it right. If I have access to an unmoderated testing platform, I can upload a mock-up of a number of items and ask them on their video to talk through what category they would put each item in. If I have access to a card sorting tool, I could do it through a card sorting tool and have them sort by category. And what's great is a lot of these tools are unmoderated. So I can launch a prototype card sort activity, recruit some participants, evaluate the result, see the data, evaluate the results, and do all of that in 1 or 2 days. When I can do that in 1 or 2 days, and most of that time is just waiting for people to participate in the test, now I can do this for like 5, 6, 8, 9 assumptions all in parallel. So I can run a test to test, do people know the right category? I can run a usability test to see if they understand the mechanism I plan to use when adding a category, right? And so when I run a whole bunch of teeny tiny tests, I learn a lot about my idea. Now, here's the thing. When we test a whole idea, we tend to get broad feedback. People like it or they don't, they can use it or they can't. We don't always get feedback on the particulars, which means we don't know why they liked it or why they didn't like it or why they were able to do what we needed them to do or where they ran into problems. With assumption testing, we're collecting building blocks. We're recognizing that we're learning exactly what's working about our idea and exactly what might not work about our idea. And this is what gives us the data we need to iterate and evolve our ideas to make them better work for our customers. And if we're working with sets of ideas and it turns out most of our ideas aren't working out, we do know which assumptions are working out. And those assumptions can be the basis for our next round of brainstorming, right? So assumption testing allows us to go faster. It allows us to learn more from our customers, and it allows us to evaluate more solutions, which gets us to better solutions. I hope that helped to clarify assumption testing. If you still have questions, let me know in the comments below.